The text message came in at 4:47 inches the afternoon. While the nurse was still pressing gauze against the side of my head. Maya needs space to process. You're making everything about yourself. Don't contact us until you're ready to apologize. That was my brother's message. Not are you okay, not I'm on my way, not even what happened. He was asking me to apologize. While I was sitting in the emergency room at Toronto General, with a gash above my ear, and a wrist that had already swollen to the size of a baseball, I read it twice. Then I put the phone face down on the blanket beside me, closed my eyes, and breathed through my nose the way my doctor taught me when my anxiety flares. 1, 2, 3. Then I picked the phone back up, opened my banking app, and started making calls. To understand why, you need to understand where the money came from. I am 31 years old. I work as a registered nurse at St. Michael's Hospital in downtown Toronto. I do 12-hour shifts, mostly nights, mostly on the cardiac unit, where the work is the kind that follows you home and sits at the foot of your bed while you try to sleep. I have been doing this since I was 24. I do not own a car. I take the subway. I bring my lunch in a container I wash and reuse. My apartment in Leslieville is small and faces an alley and costs me $1,800 a month, which in Toronto is considered a bargain. Over 7 years, doing all of that, I had saved $94,000. My brother David is 34. He works in marketing. Or he says he does. The title on his LinkedIn changes every 8 months or so. He has never once talked to me about a savings account. He has, however, talked to me extensively about his lifestyle. The condo he wanted in Liberty Village. The trip to Portugal he was planning. The new road bike that was somehow always one paycheck away. When he met Maya, I thought she might be good for him. She was sharp and beautiful and laughed loudly at her own jokes. She had a real estate license and a following on Instagram where she posted about interior design and what she called intentional living. I didn't know what intentional living meant. I was too busy working 12-hour shifts to live intentionally. They got engaged 14 months ago. 3 weeks after the engagement, David called me. He didn't start with hello. He started with, I need to talk to you about something Dad would have wanted. Our father died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 8 weeks from diagnosis to the end. He was 61 years old, and he was the kind of man who fixed things quietly without being asked, and remembered everyone's coffee order, and drove my mother to every single one of her chemotherapy appointments without once complaining. In the last week of his life, he held my hand and told me to look after my brother. David needs an anchor, he said. He always has. You've always been his anchor. Sweetheart, I've been paying for that sentence ever since. What David needed, it turned out, was a co-signer. He and Maya had found a property, a semi-detached in Roncesvalles, newly renovated, listed at $1.1 million. His debt-to-income ratio was too high to qualify a loan. Maya's credit score, which she described to me as going through a transitional period, was 561. Together, they could not get a mortgage. Together with me as co-signer, and with a portion of my savings covering the down payment gap, they could. I want to be honest about this part. I knew it was a bad idea. I knew it the way you know a storm is coming, when the air pressure drops and the birds go quiet. But David said Dad's name, and I felt the anchor pull tight around my own throat, and I said yes. I gave them $40,000 toward the down payment. I co-signed the mortgage, which meant my credit, my name, and my financial history were now attached to a property I would not live in, and had no ownership stake in. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself David would refinance in 2 years once he stabilized his income. I told myself I was doing what my father asked. For the next 11 months, Maya texted me the way people text their assistant. The washer needs replacing. Can you transfer $2,000 by Friday? David says it's fine. The backyard landscaping quote came in. We need 800 more. The original budget didn't account for the slope. There's a water damage situation in the basement. 1,800. Don't worry, I'll send photos. I transferred the money every time. I never asked for receipts. I told myself this was what family did. Then the upgrade request arrived. It was a Saturday morning in November. I had just finished a night shift and was still in my scrubs, eating toast over the sink, when Maya called, not texted, called and launched immediately into a pitch, the way she does, like she had rehearsed it in the car on the way over. She wanted to convert the basement into a content studio. Professional lighting, acoustic panels, a built-in backdrop wall, a dedicated Ethernet setup. The quote she'd received was $22,000. She wanted me to cover it. She said it was an investment in the property value, which she said quickly. The way people say things they know are not quite true. I told her I needed to think about it. There was a pause. Then she said, I don't understand why you're being weird about this. David said you have the money. I want you to understand what that sentence cost me. The money she was referring to was what remained of the emergency fund I had rebuilt after the down payment. It was the money I kept, in case I got sick, in case the hospital laid people off, in case I needed to leave a situation I couldn't afford to leave. It was the money that made me feel safe. I have the money, I said carefully, but that doesn't mean it's yours. She laughed, not a funny laugh. A sharp, dismissive sound, like she was exhaling through her teeth. Okay, I'll let David explain it to you. David called me 20 minutes later. He didn't explain. He guilted. He said I was being selfish. He said I had always made things difficult. He said Dad would be disappointed. And then, when none of that worked, he said something I have not forgotten, and will not forget. Maya is going to be your sister-in-law. The least you can do is support her vision. I said I would think about it. I hung up and sat on my kitchen floor for a while. I did not transfer the $22,000. What I did instead, 2 weeks later, was drive to Roncesvalles on a Tuesday afternoon to drop off some paperwork David needed for the mortgage annual review. Maya was home. She opened the door and looked at me the way you look at a delivery driver neutral, faintly inconvenienced. She led me inside, without offering me anything to drink. The house looked good, better than good. The kitchen backsplash was marble. The living room had a custom built-in shelving unit that I was fairly certain had not been in the renovation budget. The back deck had a pergola with string lights. I was quiet, looking at all of it. Maya noticed me noticing. It photographs beautifully, she said. And I understood she was not talking to me as much as she was thinking out loud about her content. I left the paperwork on the counter. I turned to go, and then Maya said, conversationally, the way people say things when they want the words to land without looking like they threw them. You know, you're lucky we let you be part of this. Most people don't get to help build something this nice. I stopped walking. Let me, I said. You know what I mean. I co-signed a mortgage for a house I don't own, I said. I gave $40,000 that I saved working nights on a cardiac unit. I have transferred money to you 11 times in the past year. What exactly did you let me do? She set her phone down on the counter, slowly. The way people do when they want you to know you have their full attention now. You're not an owner, she said. Her voice had gone very smooth. You're a co-signer. There's a difference. You signed a piece of paper. That's all. David and I built this. We did the work. We made the decisions. You just signed your name, and now you want credit for it? She took a step toward me. She was taller than me in her shoes, and she used that the way some people do. Honestly, I've been patient with you. David has been patient. But you walking around acting like you own something here is embarrassing. You're 31 years old and you rent. You don't know what it takes to build a home. And frankly, the way you've been dragging your feet on the studio, it's like you want us to fail. I told her to stop. She didn't stop. You've been jealous since we got engaged. Everyone can see it. Your brother finally has something good and you can't stand it. You should be ashamed of yourself. Instead of being grateful that we included you, I told her again to stop. My voice came out steadier than I felt. She reached past me to pick something up off the counter, a package, some kind of delivery, and her elbow caught my shoulder, hard, and I stepped back, and my heel caught the edge of the new tile David had installed by the back door, and I went down. It was not graceful. I grabbed for the counter and missed. My wrist hit the floor first, bent the wrong way. Then the side of my head hit the door frame. I heard the sound before I felt it. I lay on the hardwood floor and looked at the ceiling and waited for the pain to catch up. David was upstairs. I heard his footsteps on the floor above me, then on the stairs. Oh my God, what happened? He looked at me. He looked at Maya. Maya said, she slipped. The new tiles are slippery, I've told you. She just lost her balance. She said it so calmly. She said it the way you say something you've already decided is true. David knelt down beside me. Are you okay? I tried to sit up. The room tilted. I need to go to emergency, I said, my wrist. He helped me to the front door. Maya stood in the hallway, arms crossed, watching. She said nothing. When David got my coat from the hook, she put her hand on his arm. Don't make a big deal of this, she said quietly. She slipped. It was an accident. David looked at her. Then he looked at me, still holding my wrist against my chest. And then he said, I'll call you a cab. Not I'll drive you. Not I'm coming with you. He called me a cab, and stood on the porch, and watched it pull away. And I watched him get smaller in the back window, until we turned the corner. The diagnosis at Toronto General was a hairline fracture in my right wrist, and a mild concussion. The doctor asked me how it happened. I said I fell. She looked at the position of the fracture for a moment, and then she looked at me and asked if there was anything else I wanted to tell her. I said no. She gave me a brace and a discharge summary, and told me not to return to work for at least 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I am a nurse. My hands are how I work. My ability to lift, to push, to hold, to react, that is my income. 3 weeks off work on reduced short-term disability meant roughly 40% of my regular paycheck. I was sitting in the plastic chair by the nursing station, waiting for my prescription, when David's message arrived. I read it. Then I put the phone face down on the blanket. Then I made a call. I called my mortgage broker, not David and Maya's mortgage broker, my own, the woman who had helped me understand the co-signing process when I agreed to it, who had also very gently warned me about the risks. Her name is Priya, and she answered on the second ring. I need to understand, I said. What happens if a co-signer is no longer able to demonstrate stable income? There was a pause on her end. Are you okay? She asked. I'm at the hospital, I said. I have a documented workplace injury. I'm on medical leave. Effective today. My income is reduced by 60% for the next 3 to 6 weeks, potentially longer depending on recovery. I need to know my legal obligations. Priya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Kendra, a co-signer being placed on medical leave, with documentation, constitutes what lenders call a material change in financial circumstances. You have a legal obligation to notify the lender, and the lender has the right to reassess the mortgage terms. How quickly does that process move? I asked. Quickly, she said, especially if renewal is coming up. It was coming up. In 6 weeks. I thanked her. I hung up. I opened my email, found the thread with the mortgage lender, and began to type. I was not dramatic about it. I was not emotional. I used the language Priya had given me. I stated that I was co-signer on the mortgage at the Roncesvalles address. I stated that effective that day, I had been placed on medical leave following an injury that had resulted in a documented reduction in income. I attached the discharge summary from Toronto General. I attached the note from the hospital physician confirming the restrictions on my ability to work. I noted that under the terms of the co-signing agreement, I was obligated to report any material change in my financial circumstances. I pressed send. Then I called a cab home. Not to their house, to mine. My phone started ringing before I had finished my tea. David first, 6 times in a row, then Maya, twice, then David again. I did not answer. The text began at 8 in the morning. The bank called. What did you do? Kendra, you need to call them right now and fix this. This is not funny. Pick up the phone. You are ruining our lives. Do you understand that? Do you even care? I read them the way you read weather alerts with information, without feeling. Then came the one that told me everything I needed to know about how Maya had framed what happened at the house. She posted an Instagram story. I only saw it because a friend screenshotted and sent it to me. Maya was sitting in her car, no makeup, which on Maya means she had applied the kind of makeup designed to look like no makeup. She was talking to the camera in the hushed, confidential tone that influencers use when they want to seem vulnerable. I'm not going to get into the details, she said, because I try to keep this space positive, but I will say that sometimes the people you're closest to are the ones who hurt you most. Someone in our family has been making things very difficult for a very long time. And yesterday, something happened that I never thought I would experience. She paused, looked down, looked back up. I just hope she gets the help she needs. The comments were full of sending love. And family trauma is so real, and you deserve better. I am a nurse. I have seen what manipulation looks like in a clinical setting. I have sat with patients whose partners explain their injuries in very calm, reasonable voices. I recognize the structure of what Maya was doing. She was getting her story out first. I opened my messages and sent one text to my building's property manager, a woman named Deborah, who has managed the building for 15 years and misses nothing. I asked her if she had reviewed the footage from the hallway camera near the elevator from last Tuesday. She called me back in 4 minutes. I saw you come in, Deborah said. You were holding your wrist funny. You had something on the side of your head. I almost called up. I'm okay, I said. Deborah, I need a favor. I need you to save that footage. She saved it. I also, that afternoon, wrote a detailed account of what had happened in the house. Every word I could remember, the sequence of events, the exact position I was in when I fell, the way Maya had described it to David while I was still on the floor. I signed it, dated it, and emailed it to myself with the hospital discharge documents attached. Then I called a lawyer, not a real estate lawyer, a civil litigation lawyer named Patrick, who a colleague had used 2 years earlier in a landlord dispute, and described as the kind of quiet that makes opposing counsel nervous. I explained the situation. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, You have a fracture, a concussion. A medical report. A witness to your condition when you arrived home. Your own written account made within 24 hours of the incident. And you were in someone else's home at the time of the fall. I'd like to see the discharge documents. I sent them to him that afternoon. The mortgage lender's response to my notification came 4 days later. It was formal and thorough and, to David and Maya, it must have read like a demolition notice. Because I had co-signed the mortgage, and my income had materially changed, the lender had placed the file under review pending the upcoming renewal. The renewal would now require full reassessment. Given Maya's credit score, and David's debt-to-income ratio without my income included, the reassessment did not look promising. David showed up at my apartment building on a Thursday evening. I saw him on the intercom camera. He was standing in the lobby in his jacket, with his hands in his pockets, looking at the floor. He looked exhausted. He looked like someone who had finally understood the shape of the thing he was standing inside. I pressed the intercom button. "I know you're watching," he said, to the camera. "Please, Kendra. I need to talk to you. Maya didn't mean for any of this to happen. The fall was an accident. She feels terrible." I waited. "I know I handled things badly," he said. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "I called a cab." "I know. I've been trying to figure out how to explain that to you, and I don't have an explanation. I just need you to call the lender. Just tell them you made a mistake. Tell them things have changed. Please. We could lose the house." I pressed the talk button. "David," I said. "I didn't make a mistake. I have a fracture and a concussion. I am legally required to disclose my medical leave to the lender. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. So do you," I said. "You made yours in the driveway." I released the button and went back to my couch. He stood in the lobby for another 4 minutes. I watched the timer on the camera feed. Then he left. Patrick called me the following week. He had spoken to an investigator he works with. The investigator had found something interesting. There was a doorbell camera on the house next door to David and Maya's, installed by the neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Mr. Okonkwo, who had mentioned to the investigator that he kept the footage for 30 days due to some vandalism in the neighborhood the previous spring. The camera's field of view, it turned out, caught the front window of David and Maya's main floor. It had recorded, on the day of my injury, at the approximate time I was on the floor inside. Maya standing in the hallway, arms crossed. Then David. Then a cab pulling up. Then Maya, still standing in the doorway, watching the cab leave, and then going back inside. It recorded all of that without audio, but it recorded it. Patrick used it along with everything else when he filed the civil claim. Maya's Instagram went quiet around the same time the claim was filed. No stories, no posts. The last thing she had posted was a curated photo of the Roncesvalles living room with the caption "Home is where the intention is," which under the circumstances read differently than she probably intended. The mortgage renewal came due 5 weeks after my injury. The reassessment, without my income as cosigner, did not qualify David and Maya for the same terms. The lender offered them a significantly higher rate and a reduced borrowing limit. They could not make the numbers work. They listed the house 6 weeks later. I know this because I still receive documents as cosigner. That paperwork I did get forwarded, even before I completed the formal cosigner release, which Patrick helped me file, and which was processed without issue given the circumstances. The house sold for $9,000 less than what they paid after factoring in real estate fees. David lost money. Maya lost the backdrop for her content. She relaunched her Instagram 3 weeks after the sale. From what appeared to be a rental unit, I could tell by the popcorn ceiling she had cropped out of most shots, but not all. She did not mention the house. She did not mention any of it. The civil claim settled out of court 4 months after it was filed. I am not able to share the specific terms. What I can tell you is that my medical bills were covered. My income loss during the recovery period was addressed, and I had enough left over to add to the savings account Maya once told me I didn't know what to do with. I haven't spoken to David since the night at the intercom. He sent me an email in February, long, careful, full of phrases like, "I've done a lot of reflection, and I understand if you need time." He did not mention Maya. He did not mention the cab. He mentioned our father twice. I read it once, then moved it to a folder I have not opened since. Some people ask me if I miss him. It is a fair question. He is my brother. We grew up in the same house. I can still tell you exactly how he takes his coffee, and what movie he wanted to watch every Christmas, and the specific way he laughed when something caught him off guard. I know him in the way you only know someone you grew up beside. But the person who called a cab and stood on a porch and watched it pull away, that person made a choice. And I have learned, slowly and at significant cost, that love is not the same thing as obligation, and obligation is not the same thing as loyalty, And none of those things are the same thing as standing at a doorway and watching someone you are supposed to protect drive away in a yellow cab while you hold your wrist against your chest and count the blocks to the hospital. My wrist healed. The concussion took longer than they told me it would. For about 6 weeks I had headaches that arrived without warning, behind my left eye, sudden and bright. I would sit quietly until they passed. I returned to street. Michael's on a Tuesday morning in January, put on my badge, walked onto the cardiac unit, and one of my colleagues looked up and said simply, "Good. We missed you." I bought a small thing for myself when the settlement came through. A used kayak, green, a little scuffed, from someone in Etobicoke on Facebook Marketplace. On weekends, when the weather allows, I take it out on the Humber River and paddle, until my arms are tired and my mind is quiet. Sometimes a friend comes with me, sometimes I go alone. The water is cold and the herons stand very still on the muddy banks and nobody asks me for anything. That silence is the most expensive thing I have ever owned. I bought it with 7 years of night shifts and a fracture, and 6 weeks of headaches, and the slow, grinding process of learning that my father's last wish was given in love and received in love and was also, quietly, the thing that nearly broke me. He asked me to be David's anchor. He didn't ask me to drown. I want to say this plainly. For anyone watching who has ever co-signed something they shouldn't have, or covered a bill they couldn't afford, or absorbed an insult in silence because the person delivering it shared your blood, the debt is not yours. You did not create it. It was handed to you wrapped in family language, in dying wishes and holiday guilt, and the exhausting mythology of what good daughters and good sisters and good people do. And you accepted it because you loved someone. And love makes us believe that if we just give enough, eventually the account will balance. It won't balance. It was never meant to balance. The moment you realize that, really realize it, in your body, not just in your head, is the moment you stop paying. I am not angry anymore. I was, for a while. And the anger was clean and justified, and I let myself feel it fully. But anger is not somewhere I want to live. What I have now is something quieter. Clarity, maybe. A clear picture of what I owe, and to whom, and what I will, and will not sign my name to. I have also been told, by someone I trust, that I should name the thing clearly. What happened in that hallway was not an accident, and it was not a slip, and it was not me losing my balance on new tile. And naming it matters. Not for the legal record, though that matters too. It matters because the story Maya told of a jealous woman who fell on her own is the kind of story that works when no one pushes back on it. I am pushing back on it. Right now, with you. In my own words. She put her hands on me, and my brother drove away, and I lay on their hardwood floor, and I handled it. I chose who to be in that moment and in every moment after. That is mine. Nobody co-signed that.